forest is chaos. Dry leaves crunch and crackle under the hooves of a desperate young deer as he runs. His chest heaves, every breath sharp like fire in his lungs. But he can't stop. He knows what's behind him. The tiger. Its roar cuts through the air, so deep and so loud that even the trees seem to shiver. Every sound it makes tells him the same thing. If he stops, if he makes one mistake, it will all be over. The deer pushes harder. His legs are trembling, but still he runs. He does not dare look back. Instead, his eyes search the forest ahead, desperate for a way out. And then he sees it. Through the blur of the trees, there's a small patch of open ground, a clearing. And in the middle of it, he sees her, his mother. Her familiar shape stands tall and steady, just the way he remembers. The soft curve of her neck, the warmth in her eyes, the safe place he has always known. If he can just reach her, everything will be all right. He pushes harder. The pain in his legs fade and hope fills his chest, and he runs faster, faster than he thought he ever could. The tiger's footsteps pound the ground behind him, but he doesn't care anymore. He doesn't look back. He just keeps his eyes fixed on her. The clearing is closer now. He can almost feel her beside him, hear her calm breath like he has so many times before. Finally, he bursts through the trees, and the world stops. Something is wrong. Her eyes are open, but they don't see him. Her body doesn't move. The grass beneath her isn't green anymore. It's soaked dark with blood. The tiger has already been there. The deer freezes. His heart pounds, but his body will not move. He's standing between what he hoped for and what is behind him. The shadow falls across his body. The roar is deafening, and this time, there's no escape. Comfort is deceptive. It calls to us even when the shadows are closing in. It lures us in with warmth, with familiarity, until we're too close to be able to see the truth. And by then, the tiger has already found us. Now, we all have our tigers. Some we see, some we don't. But most of the times, we're not even trying to run away from them. In fact, we're walking right towards them, wrapped in a blanket we call comfort. Let's look at another example that concerns death. I'm sorry for making this negative, but you know what's strange? When your body is dying from cold, deep hypothermia, many victims don't clutch for warmth. They take off their clothes. It's something known as paradoxical undressing, where their minds start hallucinating heat. Warmth becomes one of those last illusions. Their minds are convinced they're safe, when in reality, they're only minutes away from the end. Comfort in that moment isn't just a lie, but it's the last step before collapse. But honestly, isn't it so beautiful how even in our final moments, we can still manage to feel safe? How can the mind, this stubborn, fragile, strange thing, weave a cocoon around us, even when danger is already in the room? Think about it. In those last few minutes of hypothermia, the cold doesn't feel cold anymore. Your body stops shivering. There's a quiet warmth that spreads all through you, like you've stepped back into a childhood home. Your limbs grow heavy, but it doesn't feel like surrender. It feels like rest. And that's the paradox of comfort. It's not always the villain we make it out to be. Sometimes it's the hand that steadies our shaking, or the calm that lets us take one more breath before we face the storm. Sometimes comfort is the reason we even survive long enough to have a chance at escape. Think of the soldiers in trenches humming songs from back home. Think of refugees clutching a family photograph through miles of unfamiliar roads. Think of a child holding a worn-out teddy bear, even as the walls shake around him. These moments, fragile, fleeting, are not weakness. They're reminders of what we're fighting for in the first place, because comfort in its purest form is not complacency. It's connection. It's memory. It's the spark that tells us that this is worth protecting. Now, the real danger comes in when we mistake that comfort for safety, when we decide to stay in the warmth instead of stepping into the cold. That's when the tiger catches up. Here's a quick question. Just answer it in your head. Which of these do you think your body can go the shortest amount of time without? Food, water, or sleep? Well, the answer is sleep. According to medical news today, Your body can go without food for weeks, without water for days, but without sleep, it starts shutting down in just 72 hours. Hallucinations, memory loss, even organ failure start to follow. Doesn't it seem counterintuitive? Like, how can lying motionless in bed be more essential to life than eating or drinking? But the truth is, rest is where our bodies recover, where our minds process, where we recharge enough to be able to face the next day. And I think comfort works the same way. It's easy to dismiss these comfort zones as lazy or unambitious, but sometimes they are what keep us sane. Comfort is where we restore ourselves, where we recover from the constant demand to keep striving. Just like sleep, it may not look productive from the outside, but it's the very thing that allows us to dream, that allows us to function, to even attempt growth in the first place. But of course, too much of anything is dangerous. Any excess, and it starts doing the opposite of what it's meant to. Parents, you wouldn't want your kids sleeping till 2 p.m. And students, you know how just 5 more minutes can turn into a full afternoon nap, and then you wake up the next morning and it's time for school. Sleep is vital, but too much of it leaves you groggy, restless, and somehow even more tired than before. And comfort too, it restores us in small amounts, but when we stay in it too long, it starts holding us back. And that's where science gives us an interesting lens. Psychologists talk about something called eustress, the good stress, the kind of stress that pushes us to grow. It's a kind you feel right before giving a performance or right before an important exam. It sharpens your focus, forces you to prepare, and in the end, makes you stronger. Now be honest with yourself. Have you ever felt it before? That nervous energy that somehow made you do better than you thought you could? Well, most of you are nodding, but I'm sure there are a few of you thinking, no, I can't really recall. And in case you're one of them, that's your sign. That just means you've been spending too much time in comfort mode. Because here's the thing, the only way you can ever experience eustress is by stepping out of it. And that opens up to a bigger thought. What else might you be missing out on simply because comfort feels too safe to leave behind? Opportunities? Growth? Maybe discovering sides of yourself you didn't know existed? Comfort is easy, but beyond it, there's often something life-changing waiting. And for me, this very TEDx talk is one of those moments. It's a chance for me to share my voice on stage, a recording that will live on YouTube forever, something that 10 years from now, even my colleagues might stumble upon. But I'll be honest with you, I kept putting this very speech off. Days passed, and then weeks. I kept telling myself I'll get to it later, but underneath all of those excuses was the same question running through my head. Who am I, a 15-year-old, to give advice to 100 people about stepping beyond their comfort zones when I don't know how to do that myself? And that's exactly what comfort does. It forces you to delay, it convinces you to hold back, to second guess. The irony is that the very thing I was supposed to talk about, stepping beyond comfort, is what I was struggling to do in the first place. And that's a very recent example. Let me take you back to my childhood. I remember when I was learning to ride a bicycle with my dad. He promised me he'd hold on from behind, and I trusted him because why not? So I started pedaling, feeling all proud of myself. I could feel the wind on my face, and I was so sure he's right there holding me steady. But then I made the grave mistake of looking back. He obviously wasn't holding on. He wasn't even close. And that exact second I realized he'd let go, the wobbling started. My body got stiff, and the only reason I didn't fall was because without even realizing it by then, I was already riding on my own. And that moment stuck with me because it showed me something interesting. When I thought I was in my comfort zone, I was already well out of it. And that tiny shift from thinking you're safe to realizing you're not is what makes you feel the fear. Psychologists even have a name for this. It's nothing fancy, it's just the comfort zone theory. It says that when you're in your comfort zones, you feel calm and in control. But the second you're pushed out, you move into what they call the fear zone. You start doubting yourself, second guessing, maybe even wanting to run back. But if you push through that tiny little awkward phase, that fear eventually gets converted into growth. And that bike ride was my first real taste of it. The fear only showed up when I realized I was on my own. But the truth is, I was capable all along, and my dad knew it. I just needed to catch up to that fact myself. And I'm sure this example isn't personal to me. Most of us here probably remember what it was like learning to ride a bicycle for the first time. That mix of fear and excitement, but more fear than anything. The wobbling handles, the way the ground seemed so much harder than usual because falling felt inevitable. And when you're little, that fear takes over You're convinced that falling is the absolute worst thing that could ever happen to you. And then it does. You fall. You scrape your knee, maybe you cry, maybe you run inside for a Band-Aid. But once the sting fades, you realize it really wasn't the end of the world. You're still okay. In fact, the thing you were most afraid of already happened, and you survived it. And the more you fell, the better you got at riding. And I think that's the point we sometimes forget as we grow older. We treat our comfort zones like they're shields protecting us from disaster. But really, the fear we build up in our heads is almost always so much worse than reality. Because if falling off a bike didn't stop us back then why should the fear of failing stop us now? So the real question shouldn't be, what if I fall? But rather, what's the worst that can happen if I try? Because in life too, we wobble, we stumble, we lose balance, we fall. But just like that bike, every time we get back up, we realize it wasn't as bad as we thought, and we grew stronger because of it. The problem is not in falling, it's in stopping. Have you ever heard of the story of Icarus? The boy whose wings were made of wax and feathers, who flew higher and higher until he came too close to the sun. The heat melted his wax, the wings broke down, and he fell to his death into the ocean. That's the part we've all been told, the problem of reaching too high. But I bet you didn't know there's another part to the story that's not told as often. His father warned him not only of the sun, but of the sea as well. If he flew too low, the water spraying from the sea would soak his wings, make them heavy, and eventually pull him under. Too high, and he would burn. Too low, and he would drown. But in that narrow space in between, that was where life was possible. That was where flight was possible. And isn't that the same choice we face between daring to move or being trapped by hesitation? The deer fell for that trap. The moment it saw its mother, it stopped running. It chose comfort over risk. But what if it had kept going? What if instead of clinging to the safety it knew, it had trusted itself to run a little further? Maybe it would have stumbled, maybe it wouldn't have made it, but maybe it would have. The higher you rise, more painful is the fall. But better to have a fall than to never rise at all. And that's what I want to leave you with today. Don't stop when comfort calls you back. Keep going, even if you're scared, even if you might fall. Because the worst that can happen is never as bad as the regret of not trying at all. Thank you.